Hi, and welcome to Hardcover Feedback. I'm Brandy Smits, and this is Tracy Hill, and we are going to share 3 books with you this week. We have a dramatic, realistic fiction / mystery. We have a historical fiction, and we have a urban fantasy. So first off, we have The Crazy School by Cornelia Read.
Madeline Dare now teaches at the Sant'Angelo Academy, a boarding school for disturbed teenagers. But behind its ornate gates, she discovers a disorienting world where students and teachers alike must submit to the founder's bizarre therapeutic regimen. A chilling event confirms Maddie's worst suspicions, leading her to an even darker secret that lies at the Academy's very heart. Now cut off from the outside world, Maddie must join forces with a small band of the school's most violent students who may prove to be her only chance of survival.
All right. I mean, who wouldn't want to get away with crimes like that? Have them successfully written off as tragic teenage suicides, case closed. Who wouldn't have just said, suicides? Yep, those kids have been on the verge of offing themselves since, like, forever. We all knew it. Who wouldn't let sleeping dogs lie? Nobody, for God's sakes. You'd have to be certifiable. Only maybe in Cartwright's mind, that's what I was. I mean, he could perfectly well see me as a teacher from that crazy school. Another whack job frolicking on the peak of Whifflehead Mountain when she wasn't doing therapy up the 24/7 yin-yang. Not to mention the daughter of a guy who thought ninjas were after him when he wasn't worried about the KGB reading his mail. No wonder Cartwright had Baker cuff me. No wonder they hadn't taken me down with a nice fat Marlin Perkins Wild Kingdom elephant dart of Thorazine in my own living room, just to be on the safe side. Okay. The Crazy School is one of those books where when you read about it, you don't really know what you're going to get when you start it. Mm-hmm. The description wasn't really clear to what we were going to get from this book.
Not helpful. It really wasn't, because I was not remembering or expecting that there was a mystery in this somewhere. It sounded more like a drama, and it reads a lot more like a drama than your basic kind of mystery.
I kind of thought, like, from reading the description, it was going to be like more like the Dangerous Mind story, where the teacher is in, helping the inner city kids, or like the Freedom Writer's Diary.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that at all. However, the kids were the highlight of the book by far.
The kids were awesome. The teacher, Maddie, is messed up, and the other teachers are messed up, and the kids in some ways are the strongest and most centered characters in the book, but we don't get to see them very much.
No,
not nearly
really,
enough.
Not enough. But basically, it's kind of brought out as the story goes that the kids in the school who are completely messed up are not nearly as bad as possibly some of the teachers on payroll.
Thank
so
you.
It's almost like, what is this, like, the sick helping the sick, the crazy helping the crazy? I don't know what the whole point was, but apparently enter the evil overlord villain of the book, Sant'Angelo, director of the school,
Dun, dun, dun.
who spends money on helicopters and ridiculous things.
Yeah, we smell a rat really early on with him, and that, I thought, it could have been a little better disguised, really. And he's not the ideal leader for anything, much less of a school that's supposed to be dealing with these kids who are having such terrible and very real problems. These kids are genuinely suffering, and all of the adults around them, Madeline included, are not equipped to help them.
No. Well, Madeline is just a teacher. Like, she's not a social worker. She's not a psychiatrist. She's just a teacher. And she wasn't even very experienced as a teacher either to be put into a situation. But so, I don't want to give away the whole storyline, because it kind of unravels in such a way that you don't expect it to happen, like we were saying. But regardless, I think it's safe to say that this is a pretty ridiculous book when it comes to the ending. You don't see it coming. You're almost mad because the clues there's difference from being, okay, misdirection, very good tool when writing mysteries.
Yeah.
This book does not use misdirection. This book uses chaos theory and throws everything up in the air and goes, okay, let's see what lands in the big circle of this is the ending, and that's where we're going to run.
Yeah. Well said. Yes. This was not written by an experienced mystery writer, and it shows. It's like if this is supposed to be a mystery, then you need to work on your understanding of the genre a little more, dear author, because this is not a solid mystery.
No.
Maybe a solid drama in some ways, but
It's got suspense.
It's very suspenseful.
It's a suspenseful book, but there's too much mystery in it that, following clues and, whatnot like that. But I really kind of like this book, but
you can do that.
The biggest problem, and we can't say what the biggest problem is because that's the very end of the story, is the part that made us both go, really? Really? That's what you're sticking with?
Yeah.
Okay, but this
is our payoff.
It's so out there, and I really wish that we could talk about it, but we really can't because we can't talk about the whole ending part. But the ending of this book is, I can't even put it into words.
It's hopeless.
It's ridiculous.
It's really hopeless. I felt like I was set up.
Well,
I felt like I got set up and cheated.
I feel cheated. I definitely feel cheated. The ending was so, seriously, the ending, and I wrote this down, I was taking notes, we had to be explained the ending and how it worked by another character. Madeline's friend had to explain everything to Madeline on how everything worked out the way it did. There is no reason why someone would have to have a scene by scene, step by step, moment by moment recap of a book that is thoughtfully put together.
Yeah. It shouldn't work like that, ever.
There are still good parts of it, so I don't know. I guess bottom line, rating this one, I would have to give it 2 stars because I did enjoy it at times. I would recommend it to somebody else just in case it's one of those, let's see what you got out of it because maybe it's different than what I got out of it. But all in all, it had way too many flat parts to get it anything higher than that. So.
Yeah, definitely I would not go higher than that. In fact, I'm going to give it a 1 because, it was not put together well at all. And the better elements of the whole book, the kids mainly didn't see enough of them, saw too much that just didn't work, either as a drama or as a mystery. So 1, that's as high as I can go.
All right, so The Crazy School by Cornelia Read, I give it 2 stars, and Tracy gives it 1 star. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to Hardcover Feedback. Our next book is called Suspension, a historical mystery by Richard E Crabbe. 7 desperate men, former Confederate soldiers turned saboteurs, have labored for years to destroy the Brooklyn Bridge, a symbol of Yankee supremacy created by Washington Roebling. It was his bridge, his life's work, that he will pay the price earned by his actions at Gettysburg. Sergeant Detective Tom Braddock is one step behind the conspirators. With the help of an eager roundsman new to the force, he is slowly drawn closer to the unthinkable truth, a truth that none can accept.
For those who needed to get across the East River, the only way had been on a Union Ferry Company line. Though the boats were large and ran every 5 minutes during peak hours, they were still not enough. Winter months were the worst, with ice floes sometimes blocking the river for hours. The story went that in '53, John Roebling, the great bridge builder, and his son Washington, then about 15, had been stuck in the ice during a ferry ride on a brutally cold winter day. It was then, during the 3-hour delay in getting the ferry free, that old man Roebling first envisioned his bridge across the river. It hadn't been until '67 that the state legislature authorized the construction of the bridge he'd proposed, and '69 before work actually began. In the 14 years since, there had been more triumph, tragedy, and scandal than old John Roebling could ever have imagined. So there's some angry Confederate guys who want to blow up the Brooklyn Bridge.
It's kind of like a really interesting point of view in history. I mean, you don't really get to that part in your history books where it's like, and then the Civil War ended, and everyone who fought in the Civil War on the South were mad and started doing mean things. It's like you don't hear about that. It's just you kind of it's like, okay, and then the North and South shake hands and everyone goes on with their daily lives.
Yeah. So this book is a good reminder that life didn't just carry on quietly after the Civil War ended, that there was still a great deal of resentment and many people who suffered, and that the leader of this group, this conspiracy group, had very painful trauma as a result of the war, and so it really explains a lot about why he felt such a need to go ahead and do this, and he wasn't a two-dimensional cardboard guy,
Right.
like twirling his mustache and rubbing his hands evilly, that he had reason and drive behind this really bad thing that he wanted to do, and he was so strong he got these other fellas to agree to do it with him.
But it was, and it's kind of like in the same respect that I thought was interesting was the fact that you don't really think about the people who lived in the South, and then they're like, oh, well, let's go, you know, we have nothing down here because, well, we have no farms and we have no livestock and our family members are all dead. So let's move up north and try to find a life, where now they're hanging out with all the people that they were fighting against. And so that was kind of interesting play between a couple of the characters where it's like, oh, you know, what were you in? Or, oh, I fought against you on this part, because it's kind of, you know, kind of weird to think of it that way.
You know, if the book would have stuck to that part, like how these post-war people, this post-war culture was struggling to get along, you know, and with the conspiracy still being the main part of the story, I think it would have been much more successful. But what we end up with is something that's really bloated, and it's really got so many earmarks of a first author in it, and that drove me crazy, frankly. Just too much explanation, too much backstory. Some confusion. It got to be really unwieldy. I mean, the book really could have lost about a quarter of its length and not sacrificed anything of the story.
I agree.
So-
I agree with everything you just said. However, I really did like this book a lot. I am a huge fan of 1800s, you know, 19th century, you know, New York and the immigrants and everyone working and trying to survive. And like, I really enjoy this type of thing. And I thought it was really interesting with the angle of like a forensic mystery almost, with the detective, you know, uncovering the murder, which eventually leads him to the conspirators and their huge big plans to blow up the bridge.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, oh, look, okay, here's our body, and it looks like he was hit with something around this shape, and it looks like he, you
That
know,
was interesting.
and looks like that's tobacco, but he doesn't have any tobacco on him, so that must not be from him. That part, like the beginning part, that was awesome, because I was like, oh,
It was awesome.
this is how it worked. And it had a lot of other, you know, I guess I can agree with you, there's a lot of extra things. Like there's a huge part with Braddock and all of the corrupt police that didn't need to be in there.
Who cares? You know, like, make it another book. If you love it so much, make it another book.
And I could see him doing it too. Like
He could,
Like,
yeah.
if he didn't base this specifically on the Brooklyn Bridge and the attempted, possibly not attempted, you know, whatever, I'm not saying what happens in the end, but the attempt to blow up the bridge, then I could see this Braddock character, whether or not he's real, I don't know. He could be a real guy, I don't know. So I don't know how fictionalized this was, but it would be interesting to see, you know, him do other crimes, oh, let's see what else. But I don't think that was his intent. I think he wanted this more to be a historical novel about a specific event. Unfortunately, he created a character that you connect to and you want to see more from him. And you can see more from him because you spent all this time setting a groundwork that we now know everything about his personal life, his bosses, his extracurriculars, that we want to know more. So it's kind of disappointing in that way.
Yes, and it was what dear author really needed was an editorial hand guiding him along through this and telling him, why don't you save this? Save it for another book, or just cull this, trim this down a little, just someone to guide this author a little bit more, because it really just feels like a first-time author, and so it's clunky that way. I agree with you, though, that the main characters were good, the forensics were fascinating, the information about the bridge was really fascinating and very well presented. That said, it was just too much for one book, which really does seem like it was, like you said, meant to be a standalone book, and it isn't leading to something else. There's no whiff of a sequel to it, so I would be really surprised if there were such a thing to come up.
But I don't know. If there was a second one, I might read it. I don't know.
I might, if it were edited better. If it were shorter, I might give it a try.
It's pretty.
That would mean it was edited more.
It's a little hard to trudge through. But all in all, like I said, I kind of really have a, enjoyment of 1800s setting, whatever. I don't care if it's on a farm or in a city. I like that kind of stuff. So despite its problems, I definitely give this book 2.5 stars. It was entertaining. You kind of, like my favorite part about it, which I just forgot to mention, was, the wife of Roebling, who basically did everything. It was such a great female character.
Yeah,
she really stood out as awesome. She basically took care of building the entire bridge herself because, or organizing it because her husband wasn't well. So, just like that was great. Yeah, so I got to give it 2.5 stars.
Okay, well, despite the strong female lead and despite all the good things that I agree are in this book and my own love of Victoriana and that genre of fiction and love of mystery type things, I just can't go higher than that. In fact, I'm going to stick with 2. That's where I land, simply because it's too long, it wasn't edited carefully enough. So much of it could have been culled and saved for another book without hurting the story at all. So.
All right, so Suspension by Robert E. Crabbe, I give it 2.5 stars, and Tracy gives it 2. We will be right back. Welcome back. Our last book today is called Stormfront by Jim Butcher and is the first book of the Harry Dresden series.
Harry Dresden is the best at what he does. Well, technically, he's the only at what he does. So when Chicago PD has a case that transcends mortal creativity or capability, they come to him for answers. For the everyday world is actually full of strange and magical things. Most of them don't play well with humans. That's where Harry comes in. When the police bring him in to consult on a grisly double murder committed with black magic, Harry's seeing dollar signs. That is, until the mage makes Harry his next target.
My name is Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden. Conjure it by your own risk. I'm a wizard. I work out of an office in Midtown Chicago. As far as I know, I'm the only openly practicing professional wizard in the country. You can find me in the Yellow Pages under Wizards. Believe it or not, I am the only one there. My ad looks like this. Harry Dresden, wizard. Lost items found. Paranormal investigations. Consulting, advice, reasonable rates, no love potions, endless purses, parties, or other entertainment. You'd be surprised how many people call just to ask me if I'm serious. But then, if you'd seen the things that I've seen, and if you knew half of what I knew, you'd wonder how anyone could not think I was serious.
So another wizard named Harry.
Isn't that just interesting? I don't know.
It's fascinating.
It's fascinating.
But he's a man fully growed.
Yeah, this is
He's
definitely
not a kid.
This is not your, wizard school wizard stories. This is little, fantasy candy for adults. And I don't know. I'm sure that you might have heard mention of it somewhere, but there is a TV show based off of this series called The Dresden Files.
Yes.
But as librarians, we have to encourage you, read the book
Read the books.
first. Then you can watch the movie or the TV show, but read the books. Okay, there.
Yep.
Our soapbox, we're done now.
Yep. Okay. So it's a first one in a series, and there are quite a few now, and
Yeah.
it's still going on. So Harry is a fully experienced practicing wizard. He knows what he's doing most of the time, and he's got this whole practice built up around making his living doing magic. And
He kind of does, the normal, I'm a wizard, I know, I'll help the police, then I'll get a little paycheck because, that's probably the most lucrative aspect of his career. And then he has, his police contact who's kind of, stuffy
which is
and
kind of standard for any kind of PI
Right.
story. He's got to have somebody on the cops who either calls him in for help or hates his guts or both.
or both. But so there's a little bit of back history about Harry that comes out in this book, and apparently he is maybe one of the only practicing wizards in the Yellow Pages, blibbity, 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 but he kind of has a little bad rep with the other good wizards, and that kind of comes into play a little bit in this story.
Yes, there's a whole council doesn't like him, and he's got someone watching him and keeping an eye on him, making sure he doesn't screw up and break any of the rules, because he has rules that he has to go by. And
Although, as we talked about earlier, I just really don't like this stupid white council thing.
Yes.
It makes me angry. It's one of
it's
like a normal,
nemesis right
I
now.
know, but it's like
That's
the
all.
normal teacher-student relationship where it's like, even sometimes if the student's not doing anything wrong, but they have a history of doing something wrong,
Yeah.
they're usually the first one that can call into the office to question. And it makes me mad because it's like, just listen to him. He's a smart guy.
He is a smart guy, and he
But-
should be listened to. But these are the wizard cops.
I know, I
This
know.
is whereas if he had no magical powers and he were just a regular PI, it'd be the cops who
Yeah.
were all over him. And this time, it's the White Council. And we don't know this, but we get whiffs every now and then through the story. He's done stuff that he knows he shouldn't have done, that he knows broke the rules, and however goofy or stupid the rules might be, they're still in place, and he's not observing them all the time. So as far as the action goes, though, now, whenever I come into something where everything's normal except there's one thing different, like, there's this regular world that's like ours except everybody's fish,
Yeah.
or something like that, I have
would
to
be kinda
ask,
cool.
why fish?
Yeah.
Or in this instance, why a wizard? Is there something? Well, yes, it's not just that he's solving normal crimes, he's solving bizarre, magical
Right.
crimes. So, yes, it has to be a wizard, and that's good. That justifies the series for being and doesn't just stick a wizard into the everyday world.
So- And that's commendable. The world that Butcher created is very developed, and it's in Chicago. So you're like, hey, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Hey, I know what's going on. So
That's
that's
fun.
always fun too. I mean, that's always cool to see a setting that you recognize.
Truly.
And then, from setting, we'll move to characters. There are some awesome characters in this book. My favorite is Bob.
Yay, Bob.
Bob is a skull with the spirit in it and kind of helps Harry with his magic. And he's a little saucy and a little cranky at times. And
He's cool.
he's probably one of the best characters, that and the fairies. I
He
like
knows
the fairies
stuff.
too.
Yeah, the fairies were neat too. Pizza loving fairies. And
Just
yeah.
you know, and your normal characters that you see everywhere, you know.
Yeah, there's women, there's reporter, there's a reporter in a lot of private investigator type things. There's the obligatory reporter, but she's good.
Well, she's the reporter for the interesting paranormal problems.
Good point. Yes,
Newspaper.
she's
so she's
not
all
a
over
regular
Harry.
reporter. Yeah, that's why she's attached to Harry. So it's a very logical. The internal logic of this series, as far as the first book goes, is fantastic.
It's a wonderful
really
setup.
hangs together
it really
well.
Is. It's a good first book.
Yeah, and Bob's very cool.
And Bob is the best.
Bob's pretty awesome.
pretty good.
I like the cat too.
Yeah. I forgot about the cat. So, okay. I don't really want to go too much more into this because
we'll trash it.
You can't give it all away. It's crazy magical secrets and surprises and whatever. So we'll just go right to the rating.
Yeah.
I loved this book. I really did. I love the series. I think it's going to be, it's one of those books that everyone's been talking about. You hear about this from so many people, and I was a little wary because I don't really like what everyone else likes. Usually if it's a bestseller, I don't like it. And it's not a pretentious thing, I just really don't.
Yeah.
But I really like this one. I'm giving it 4 stars, which I don't do very often, but I really think that the character aspect, the setting, everything, the humor, it's very funny at times. It all works around really well, and yeah, I gotta give it 4 stars.
Okay, I have great love for it too. I'm gonna just shy down a little bit and say 3.5 because but it is an amazing first book, and especially for a series kickoff, they're not always the best.
Exactly.
So
It hooks you.
Yeah, a lot of credit too for this. I have high hopes for the rest of the series. So yeah.
So we'll give our little recap here. The first book, The Crazy School by Cornelia Read. I gave it 2 stars, and Tracy gave it 1 star.
Yeah.
Suspension by Richard E Crabbe. I gave it 2.5 stars, and Tracy gave it 2 stars. And finally, Stormfront by Jim Butcher. I gave it 4 stars, and Tracy gave it 3.5. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you